What's up, it's Cinema Shogun here, and I'm sure most of you all have seen the news by now, but for those of you all who might not know, the Chinese military has now actually completely surrounded Taiwan, forming what I would call a blockade for what they are calling military drills. Now, this is a direct response to the president of Taiwan traveling to America, going on a little tour, meeting with several U.S. politicians, including the Speaker of the House. I'm not sure how many of you all are aware of the relations between China and Taiwan. I say this often, but it's a complicated situation. China doesn't really view Taiwan as its own independent place, basically. They view Taiwan as basically part of China. And in many ways, I don't think they really appreciate the U.S. influence that's going on in Taiwan. And I mean, I don't want to dive too deep into all of that because I don't want this video to be too long, but there's a lot of stuff going on right now in that region. You know, I think that region is going to be pivotal in World War III whenever we do see World War III, which I would argue we're probably in World War III right now. But a lot of people are writing this off like, hey, there's nothing to see here. These are just drills. This is training. But I see this as a cause for concern. Because the last time we were told, these are just drills, this is just training. A few days later, bombs started dropping in Ukraine, right? The positioning of troops is everything. It may not be as big of a factor in modern warfare, because a lot of modern warfare is fought through intelligence, it's fought through drones and stuff like that, but back in the day, positioning would be everything. Oftentimes, it didn't matter who had the biggest army, the most well-trained, well-equipped army. What mattered is who had the best positions, who had the best vantage points, right? So what I worry about here is that one day these training exercises, just like we saw with Russia and Ukraine last year, history has a habit of repeating itself. And let's not forget recent history. In today's world, the positioning of troops is difficult because everything's being monitored 24/7. So the only way to kind of get the upper hand and sneakily position, your military units is by pretending that you're doing training exercises. So I'm not here to tell you that China is going to invade Taiwan right now. But whenever China does, it's going to be under the guise of training exercises. Because the way modern warfare works, I don't see any other way that you could really position, battleships and units of soldiers and what have you without just, either just going balls to the wall right in, or, of course, going under the guise of these training operations. So, what's stopping them? Because right now they have Taiwan surrounded. And they didn't have to fight. They didn't have to shoot a single shot. Nothing. They surrounded Taiwan. So what's stopping them from doing training exercises surrounding Taiwan and just going ahead and saying, hey, let's go ahead and go in. Let's do it now. You know what I mean? What's stopping them? What is really stopping them? And once you form this blockade, how does Taiwan get any resources in? You know what I mean? So in many ways, this training operation or a future training operation can be used strategically, and I think will be used strategically to actually invade Taiwan. Well, and some people will have a problem with my use of words by saying invading Taiwan, because they will say, well, you can't really invade Taiwan because Taiwan's part of China. So, I mean, the way we view things, the way other people view things, it's totally different. And I'm not here to get into that debate. I'm not here to even cover the story from that angle. All I'm talking about is from a military aspect. This is how I think things are going to go down. Now, the U.S. supposedly has an obligation that if this happens, we're supposed to defend Taiwan. So you tell me, what's going to happen if China has a blockade around Taiwan? What, are we going to have to bust through that blockade? And the way war works, it's really weird. And there's levels to it, if you will. And there's still kind of little unspoken rules to engagement sometimes. And when you have a superpower like America and a superpower like China going against each other, you have to be careful not to escalate things too far. You know what I mean? So if the U.S., let's say this popped off and the U.S. wanted to get some supplies into Taiwan, I would assume they would have to go through this blockade. In order to go through this blockade, they're going to have to go pretty hard. They're going to have to take some ships out of the water, and that will be escalating the situation to a whole nother level. And before you know it, cities are getting wiped off the map and buttons are getting pressed. You know what I mean? So we don't want to get to that point. But the way I view it, if they form this blockade around Taiwan, it's not going to be like the situation in Ukraine where we're just able to just pump Ukraine full of weapons and money, and Joe Biden flies into Ukraine and walks around while they run fake air, raid sirens, and he's talking to Zelensky. That's not how Taiwan is going to go. So I don't know how we would supply them with weapons. I don't know how we would supply them with anything without directly getting into conflicts with the Chinese military, which would escalate the situation to a whole nother level. So, when I say the positioning of troops, and the positioning is everything, if they could strategically position their battleships and their navy around Taiwan and form this blockade without any, pushback, then that already sets them, that already gives them a certain advantage. But I want to go ahead and dive into this article because Lindsey Graham is trying to warn people about the crisis that is unfolding in Taiwan. Let's go ahead and hop into this article. Senator Lindsey Graham on Sunday openly voiced fears about a potential Chinese blockade of Taiwan. A test to the U.S., he said, could line up with the run-up to the 2024 presidential election. Taiwan's not the problem, he said. It's Putin and Xi, the leaders of Russia and China, and their expansionist aims. But an increased American presence in the region, he said, could allay threats from the emboldened duo. The remarks by Graham came amid military drills conducted by China in proximity to the island, a democracy which has long been claimed as a province by its massive northwestern neighbor. And they come after Taiwanese president traveled across the United States as part of a 10-day international tour, meeting with the House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries in New York before jetting off to meet with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and other key House foreign policy cogs outside Los Angeles. It's a trip that has resulted in fierce pushback from Chinese officials, who have sanctioned the two organizations that hosted her during the trip, the Hudson Institute and the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library, and labeled the visit as a provocation. And now, a 3-day spat of military exercises, a stern warning as put by the People's Liberation Army officials that are to end on Monday. Taiwan's defense ministry counted 71 Chinese warplanes that crossed the Taiwan Strait on Saturday alone. I would up our game, Graham said on Sunday. If you don't up your game now, you are going to have a war. The South Carolina senator advocated for a series of deterrent measures that he said could stave off an eventual Chinese military takeover of Taiwan, which produces over 90% of the world's most advanced semiconductors. I would increase training and get the F-16s they need in Taiwan, Graham said. There's a backlog. I would solve that backlog. I would move war forces to South Korea and Japan. I would put nuclear-tipped cruise missiles on all of our submarines all over the world. And in the event of an invasion, Graham, who said he believes in the long-standing one China policy, would support U.S. troops or would support sending U.S. troops to help defend Taiwan. Since the 1970s, the U.S. has maintained a commitment to the defense of Taiwan, even while not officially recognizing the island as distinct from China. It's a thin line, one that has increasingly blurred in recent years. A trip to Taiwan made by former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi last August piqued international interest and a frenzied Chinese response. The following month, Joe Biden told Scott Paley in a 60 Minutes interview that U.S. forces would in fact defend the island if in fact there was an unprecedented attack. These are intimidation tactics, and a saber rattling, in my judgment, only firm up our resolve against the Chinese Communist Party. It has no deterrent effect on us. In fact, I think it galvanizes the United States support for Taiwan, says McCall. So, at this point, I think we're looking at the inevitable, and I think this is what the U.S. wants. I mean, when I say the U.S., I don't mean us, I don't mean me, and I don't mean you. I mean the powers that be. I think they want this military conflict. I don't necessarily believe that they want to get into a full-scale head-on collision with China, but I think they want to test the waters through Taiwan, just like I think they wanted to test the waters with Russia through Ukraine. So when I hear all of this talk about upping the troops in South Korea and in Japan, it just tells you that we're getting ready for something really big. And I'm sorry, I know my fingertips are probably weird. I got done dyeing Easter eggs right before I made this video. But it's just, everything that we're seeing right now, it's almost a direct carbon copy to everything we saw with Ukraine. So in many ways, I feel like even me making this video, I feel like I'm just warning you all and talking to you all about the inevitable, just like I was a year and a half ago before the situation in Ukraine. So it's weird for me while I'm sitting down and verbalizing my opinions. They're like the same exact opinions I had before with a totally different situation, but something that is very similar actually. So it's really weird. But what we're seeing right now is we're seeing the process. We're watching the process unfold. I believe at this point, the way both sides are acting, the way both sides are talking, I believe that this is happening. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And right now, we're just seeing the buildup. They're going to talk about it. You're going to hear more and more about it. You're going to see maybe even a couple more training exercises before it pops off. But one thing that I do want to touch on before I leave. I don't really get behind politicians. So Me reading Lindsey Graham's comments is not me saying I support Lindsey Graham. I don't even know much about Lindsey Graham. But I do agree with him on one thing. He says that he believes that this would happen during the build-up to the election. And that's something that I was just saying in my last video. I believe that is the time. Like, if I was a general, or if I was the leader of an army, and I knew that invading Taiwan was on the agenda, reclaiming Taiwan is on the agenda, and it's on your agenda, you don't really know when, you're waiting for your opportune time, and you see the state that America is in right now. You see that no one in America seems to be able to agree on anything. You see that our military has, I support the people in the military 100%, but it's grown soft. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean like everyone in the military, but there's some weird stuff going on with some of our military leaders and stuff. I don't even want to get into it. But America is softer than ever right now. And like I was telling you on the last video, we're headed to one of the most toxic, vile, I can't even think of the words to describe what this next presidential election is going to be like. If the last week or so is any example, we have we have former presidents going to jail. We got all types of stuff going on. Both sides are fighting, protesting in the streets. It's going to be wild. So if I was a commander of the Chinese army and invading Taiwan was on the agenda, and I knew that all of this stuff was going on in America, I would move it up to right there. Right when we're in the middle of dealing with the lead up to the presidential election, that would be the most opportune time to strike. And if you wanted to strike at that time, now would be the time that you're getting ready. You're getting prepared. You're getting ready for the build-up. And it looks to me like America is getting ready for the build-up too. And in many ways, like I said, I think America kind of wants this. Maybe it will be good for the economy. People are going to make money from it. Make no mistake about that. But I'm going to keep an eye on the situation. Hopefully it blows over. But I think it's just prolonging the inevitable at this point. Let me know your thoughts, though, down in the comments. While you're down there, hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe, ring that notification bell, and I'll talk to you all in the next video.